It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Guaranteed returns. Now, when I'm speaking in very broad terms when I mention guaranteed returns, because there's a lot of things. Guaranteed returns could mean you keep all of your money under your mattress. You keep all of your money in CDs. It means you're only buying insurance-based products that have guarantees. And here's the thing I thought was interesting. When I see any type of product that has a guaranteed rate of return, there's a reason they're marketing off of that guarantee. Is because there's a 2015 Bankrate article I went and pulled. 78% of Americans said they prefer financial products with guaranteed returns over other options. That sounds great. I mean, yeah, I like to have guaranteed.
Sound awesome.
But here's the problem with guarantees. They're very expensive. And what do I mean by that? And it's multiple layers. It's like a layer of an onion. You can peel it, and there's all kind of different parts of what makes these expensive. The first is loss of purchasing power. I grew up in a household where investing in my household was CDs and cash accounts.
So basically just cash, staying in cash.
And that sounds good because you're like, well, I can't lose money. 2008, no big deal,
right,
because I've got my money in cash. The problem is, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's the government organization that tracks a lot of data, inflation has averaged since 1913 3.2% a year.
So since 1913, the value of goods, so what is inflation? It's the cost of a basket of goods. That value of goods has gone up by about 3.2% every year.
It's why my parents were able to buy a house in 1978 for $60,000 that might be worth, $250 to $300
right.
now. It's because things just go up in value. The cost of bread, the cost of milk, the cost of cars. The cost of what you get paid in labor and wages goes up over time. But here's the cool part, or the part that you need to be aware of. Money loses half of its purchasing power in 22 years based upon that 3.2% inflation rate. So that means you sit on cash in your retirement. Realize you retire, especially you guys that are a part of the FIRE movement. You retire super early. You still have 30, 40, even 50 years to live off these assets. You have to be careful taking out all risk, especially if you have, inflation as a concern.
So what you're saying, it sounds like what you're saying is, so there's like investment risk where the value of investments go down, and a lot of people want to inoculate themselves from that. But the risk of losing value through purchasing power decreases could actually be even more scary than the value of investment losses.
So staying in cash can be risky on its own thing. So the next thing, a lot of you are going, well, I don't have to worry about that because I'm actually going to buy a product like an equity indexed annuity or something that's still going to get me a rate of return. But when a product or a company tells you it's going to be a guaranteed rate of return, how can they do that? Here's how they can do it, guys. Here's the secret formula for how they offer you guarantees. They have to be able to control, they have to take their risk away to be able to offer you this product. And the way they do that is they control your access to the money and they control your behavior. If you can do those two things, because what blows up, why can't we give you guarantees? The reason you can't give guarantees is because nobody knows tomorrow what the stock market's going to do. Nobody knows what it's going to do next month. Nobody knows what it's going to do next year. But if you start looking at a 10-year period, you look at a 15-year period, you look at a 20-year period, man, long-term, financial investing is very powerful and very good for those that do it. So an insurance company, if they tell you, hey, we're going to take away all of your risk, what they'll do is they might put a 10-year surrender period on there, meaning they're going to control your access to your money by putting huge surrender fees on there for up to 10 years, sometimes 12 years. I mean, we've seen them go even beyond 10 years.
That's right.
The other thing is they'll do is that they're going to, that 10-year period lets them control your behavior. You can't sell at the worst time. Just because the market got its teeth kicked in, you're not trying to sell it because they've locked you out of doing any type of emotional reaction. The other thing they're doing to protect them so they can give you guarantees, they know, when we quote things like the market's going to get you potentially for a 20-year-old like a 10% rate of return, like the S&P, that's the historical average. But if you go look at the S&P, it doesn't give you 10% in beautiful little, bowed off little boxes that are wrapped all nice. You'll see something like 2013 where the market can make 32%. Yeah. But then you'll see years like 2015 where it maybe only makes 1% or 0.7. And then you'll see years like 2000 where it loses over 20%. There's all kind of ups and downs. So they know that there's going to be years of outsized performance. And what they'll do to protect themselves is they'll limit your upside potential. You might see a participation rate on these products that give you guarantees where you only get 80% of the upside, or you get capped at 7% or 8%. So those years that the market makes 30%, you don't get 30%. You might only get 8%.
Well, and from a common sense standpoint, that makes sense on how insurance companies can pay for this, right? So if the market's down 2% and they lock me in where I can't lose money, but the market makes 33% and they get to keep 20 plus of that, it's pretty easy for those to pay for those down years, especially
It definitely covers those down
over the
years.
long term. The market's consistently up. It's up more often than it's down if you just look at it in yearly periods. So that makes a lot of sense.
And I'm worried some of you might have just gotten glazed over when I talked about participation rates, when I started talking about how expensive, when I talk about purchasing power and inflation, like, whoa, you start going, so you realize very quickly, this stuff is complicated.
That's right.
And the fact that it's complicated means expensive potentially too, because you got a lot of hands in there, a lot of compliance.
Sure.
Pay attention to these things. So how do you avoid, what's the money guy way, Bo?
Yeah, so a lot of times we have clients come to us and they say they want a guarantee and they want, and that's generally associated with like an insurance type product. And so what we try to do is we want to educate you that there are guarantees and there are high probability outcomes. And so like a really high probability outcome is that over the long term, if you have a long investment time horizon, it generally goes up. Here's another really high probability outcome. If you make sure you have adequate emergency reserves as a retiree, like 18, 24, 36 months of cash, you can weather most storms. If you look at historically how long a downturn lasts, if you can understand the differences in guarantees and high probability outcomes and understand the costs associated with each, you're going to be set up for success. Education is your friend.
Yeah, you don't have to pay that huge premium for protection and peace of mind
That's
that I
right.
think that people are out there selling.